Speed at the bottom of the helix. Welcome to another Gateway X clinic presented by NMRX. Our next presenter is a studio segment producer for Trainmasters TV, also building a 15 by 70 feet freelance layout based on CSX in West Virginia in the late 1980s. We welcome Mr. Barry Silverthorn.
Thank you for the introduction, Speed. And thank you everyone for coming to this little clinic. This is a clinic that I've only done once live before in Syracuse, New York, at a local division of the NMRA. We did a make and take, and unfortunately we won't be able to do a make and take here today, but if you want to pretend to follow along, grab a piece of paper and fold it up and do origami, you can play along. I make a product called Roomettes that is interiors for buildings that basically fold up, and within about half an hour you can put an interior building in a building and have it lit. So what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about what that is, and I'll talk about some lighting tips that you can use, whether you have Roomettes or not, whether you do your own interiors. Maybe you'll be able to pick up something that that you can use along the way. So I'll go to my slideshow and I'll show you what it is that I do. Just go to share here, and you should see the Roomettes logo. So what are Roomettes? Roomettes are basically a quick and easy way to add interiors to your structures, structures from a variety of manufacturers. And specifically, what are the features? Roomettes create the illusion of 3D using two-dimensional images on the walls of the building. They're laser cut cardstock that have graphics printed on them. The cardstock's about 15 thousandths of an inch thick. It's the kind of thing you can put in a building, and even if you have a damp basement, it's thick enough that it's not going to warp. And they're precision fit for the structure that they go into. So if a kit says it's designed for example, Dale's Place, it's designed to fit in a small town USA kit made by Rick's. I think that one is Sally's Antique Shop that it goes into. So it's designed so that it's custom fit for that building. And we'll talk a little bit later about generic rooms or adapting rooms to different buildings, but each one is made specifically to go in a building. And if you've put the kit together the way the instructions are given to you, the other manufacturer's kit, the building, the Roomettes should fit very, very precisely, and you shouldn't have any problem getting them in. So they fold together, and they've got tabs that allow you to basically glue the walls into a little box, and you don't need a lot of tools to do that. The X-Acto knife, a popsicle stick, and sometimes a long item like a file, just so you can get in there. If your finger's too big to get in there, you can stick a file or a popsicle stick in there. The LEDs are included with my kits, and they're compatible with Woodland Scenic's Just Plug system. They're compatible with a couple other systems too, but if we just stick with Just Plug now, a lot of people know that system. So it's very easy to kind of see how they work. And then I'll get into later some of the other options you have for expanding beyond what Woodland Scenics offers. And some kits include details and signs. So for example, in Dale's Place, you can see, if you look closely, there's some shelving in there. There's signs in the windows, and there's a counter, kind of things you find at a variety store. And those things add a little more 3D detail to trick your eye into thinking that everything you're seeing in the building is 3D. So where did this idea come from? About 4 years ago, I was working on a project for Trainmasters TV. It was a series called Start Small, Think Big, which was about building a modular style layout. And one of the things we did was we put some of these Woodland Scenics poles with lights on them on the layout. And what it did, it just kind of made, to me, it made the scene pop. I'm not a big light, let's put it this way. At the time, I wasn't a big fan of lighting, on a layout. I don't dim the lights in my layout room ever. But these lights just gave a little bit of life to the layout that otherwise wasn't there. And I started to think about, well, what other things could I do on my own layout to add a little more pop like that? And since I model a overcast day, I thought it'd be really easy to do that, because my lighting is normally a little lower in the room, and it would just add a little bit of 3D detail to the buildings. And here's an example of that. This is my layout, and I've just added some exterior lighting to this coal loader and some lighting up in the coal dump. And you can see it just adds a little bit of drama to it. And there I ended up turning the lights out. So there's something I don't normally do, and I found a kind of a new way to enjoy my layout. So why am I using the Just Plug system? Well, first of all, it's quick and easy to get good results. It's super easy to get quick results. I think a lot of people are familiar with Just Plug. You can find it in just about any hobby store. The system's been around for, I think, about 5 years now, and they keep adding more and more accessories to it to add more different lighting options. The system itself, I'll just go through this really quickly in case anyone isn't familiar with it. If you look on the left there, you can see the most basic version of the system, which is a power supply, a wall wart, and then there's what's called a hub. That's a light hub, that box with the red stripe on it. And it has 4 outputs, so you can plug 4 LEDs into that, and each output has a dial on it. What we think of as a rheostat. It's not actually a rheostat, but there's a dial there that will allow you to adjust the brightness. And in case I forget later, I'm going to say right now, being able to adjust the brightness is very important, I think, when you're doing lighting structures, because you want to have it as subtle as possible. I think the thing that really ruins a good structure interior is to have too much light. So you really need to be able to dial down those LEDs. And part of the problem with dimming an LED is, unlike a light bulb where you can adjust the voltage and get a dimmer output on the light bulb, with an LED, if you dial down the voltage at a certain point, the LED will just go out, and usually that's a point before the actual dimness you want to achieve. So what this system will allow you to do, the Just Plug system, rather than changing the voltage to dim the LED, basically it keeps the voltage constant, and it adjusts the frequency of the voltage to kind of dial down. It actually makes the LED in a way flash. So it's flashing at a rate that your eye can't perceive, but the slower it flashes, the lower the light output is perceived by your eye. And so there's some electronics in that box that actually it changes the modulation of the output voltage so that it dims the light, even though the voltage is consistent. So on the right, you can see a setup, an expanded setup using this system. Once you get beyond the 4 outputs of the light hub, and especially if you're lighting a structure with several rooms in it, you're going to outgrow that light hub very quickly. So what Woodland Scenics has come up with is something called the expansion hub, which is the box with the blue stripe. And from that, you can power several light hubs in order to expand. And each one of those light hubs with the red stripe, each one of those outputs is dimmable. Now, if you look in the middle there, there's a box with a green stripe on it, and that's what's called a port sharing device. So you'll see it's plugged into one of the ports, and you've got 1 output into it, and you've got 4 outs. So that allows you to have to get, I guess, more expandability from one light hub without having to buy another light hub. The only caution is that when you dim that output on the light hub, all 4 of the LEDs on the port sharing device will dim the same amount. So if you have them all in one building, that might not be the best situation because you might want to have one room brighter and one room dimmer. What I recommend to people is to spread those 4 LEDs out across several different buildings. And even though they're all the same dimness, they'll be either lighter or brighter in relationship to other LEDs in that building. The middle hub is what's called a sequencing hub. And that adds a little animation to the lighting so that you can have the 4 outputs of that hub randomly sequence on and off to simulate lights going on and off inside buildings. And there's a pot there that you can adjust the timing so that you can have that happen rapidly, or you can spread it out so that they change like every minute or a minute and a half. It's quite a big range, actually. That's a sequencing hub. And you can shut that off if you want and just have them the brightness on all the time. And in addition, there's an on-off switch available so that you can switch the whole works on and off anytime you want with one button, or you can just pull the wall wart out. But the auxiliary switch has an interesting use, and I'll get to that later. Oops. So there's an example of Woodland Scenics, one of their catalog shots that shows, you know, the lighting in the street. And they also have a line of vehicles that have headlights and tail lights. And now they have billboards as well. So there's a lot of variety you can use with the system. The one thing that I was never really happy with, though, was about lighting buildings. All their products are great. They're plug and play, and they give you a great effect. But I found their solution to lighting buildings was it could have gone a lot better. And that's where I think the Roomettes that I've made kind of fill that gap. They suggest using their light diffusing window film, which is basically a translucent film that you put on the inside of the windows, and you can put an LED in there and it spreads the light around so that you get an even lighting all over. You can black out certain windows if you want, but really there's no way of kind of simulating. This doesn't simulate individual rooms, and it certainly doesn't give any 3D depth to any of the rooms. Matter of fact, what it does to me, it looks like one of these paintings by the artist Thomas Kincaid. You might have seen these prints in Walmart or Target over the years, where the whole house is just kind of lit up like there's a fire inside. And I don't think that's kind of the effect that we want for our railroads. So here's some examples of some of the Roomettes kits that are lit with the Just Plug system. And this is a DPM building, which I think is City Cab, the DPM City Cab. Pam's Pet Shop. This is the more catalog showroom, or it's also sold as a fire hall. So I've turned it into a fire hall with a Roomettes kit. This is a Walther's tenement building. That building's about probably about 2.5 inches deep, so it's a backdrop building. Also, the building on the right, that's a DPM flat kit too. That's about an inch deep, that building. So you can see how it adds some depth to a building that otherwise would be just right up against the wall. This is a City Classics Crafton Avenue gas station. And it's got some 3D details in this kit. For example, the desk and the wiper blade box, just to give it, again, a little bit of 3D depth. And Schultz's Garage by DPM, this has been turned into the Easttown motorcycle using a Roomettes kit. So I'm just going to stop the slideshow a bit for a sec. And I'll show you one of the, the one we just saw, the Easttown motorcycle. That's the kit there. So if you were to pick one up, you'd see it's a bag with some cardboard in it, and there's some LEDs inside, ready to go. So I'll just show you how the kit goes together. It comes laser cut, and the reason it's laser cut is because if I tried to tell you in instructions where to cut and how to cut, you'd have to cut the front, and then you'd have to turn it over and cut certain portions of the back so that they'd be scored and not cut right through. And I found that was just going to be way too complicated for me to do that. And I can tell you, because when I do the prototype for each one, I have to cut these out by hand. And it is the worst part of my job, having to go through and figure out where to score on the back and where to cut on the front, and it takes forever. And I wouldn't want to do that to anybody. And the laser cuts way better than I ever could. The cuts are straight. And what it actually does is, I'll take it out of the fret here. There's about 1 millimeter of tab there that just kind of keeps it in the fret. I recommend using an X-Acto knife to get them out, but to do it really quickly, I'll just do it by hand. What's really cool about the laser is when it does cut the paper, it kind of cauterizes the wound, so to speak. And these perforated lines where it folds, they're burnt, and they actually snap very nicely, very cleanly, which you wouldn't get with a score with just using a knife. So I get a nice clean bend, and I don't even have to put a straight edge or anything along it to bend it. I just have to be careful that I bend it evenly, and I can bend that right into a box. Now, how long did that take me just sitting here talking? Like maybe 1 minute. And it turns into a box like that. Origami. So what I recommend for gluing them is you can use white glue. You can use Eileen's tacky glue. One glue that I found that works really well is something called Gem Tack. And I think you can get this at Michael's, most craft stores. It's about $10 a bottle. I really like it because I can use it on everything else on my layout too. I find a million uses for it. I'll give them a little commercial. This is great for gluing details on buildings because it has a little bit of a rubberiness to it. I find if I'm CAing sometimes on a building, the joint is very crunchy, crusty, and I can wax something and just knock it right off. With the Gem Tack, it's got a little bit of a rubberiness to it, so if I hit something, it doesn't always knock it off. So I find a whole lot of other uses for this. Anywhere you could use white glue. It takes a little longer to dry, but once it's dry, it's really flexible. So all I do with that is I take usually a toothpick or something to apply glue, and I put a thin layer of glue right where it says glue. And I usually do the bottom first. So I would glue the tabs and glue the bottom in. And what you can do is set that on your workbench and just take a popsicle stick, or even your finger if you can get it in there. And just, once the glue is set, just burnish it like that. And that burnishes the glue into the cardboard. Doesn't take a lot of glue. And I find that because it's a little tacky, it kind of holds things in place while the glue dries. So it's got a real nice stickiness to it that it's really useful when you're doing something like this. So once you've assembled all the rooms, then it's a matter of putting the LED in the top. And I'm going to show you, I'll show you some of the tricks that I use. I'll go back to the slideshow again and show you a few things that we can use as tricks there. So here's a building flat that has the glass glued in it. And I've actually used, what do you know, Gem Tack to hold the styrene glass in place. And what I sometimes do is once it's set is I'll take a little blob and put it on the corners. And when that blob dries, that glass is not going anywhere. And actually, what I found about the Roomettes is that if you're gluing the roomette onto that wall now with the glass in it, I don't know if you've ever had window glass fall out of the building like 2 years after you built it, and now there's no glass in the window anymore. The roomette will actually hold that piece of glass in there because it's pinched between the roomette and the wall. So as long as the roomette's glued in well, that glass is not going to go anywhere, which is really handy. And at this point, you can dress up those windows before you put a roomette in. City Classics makes really cool window shades, Venetian blinds, and drapes. You can put those in ahead of time. Also, before you put your roomette in, you may want to put in some other details. You can put figures inside the room. You just need to make sure they're really glued well, because once they're in there, it's very hard to get them out. I actually have had them come loose, like parts come loose inside, and it's not a it's not a happy situation. But what I've ended up doing is taking a very sharp knife and just cut a hole in the ceiling, reached in with tweezers, and re-glued whatever it is back in place, and then patched the hole in the ceiling. But it's not something you want to really do. So I always advise people to make sure any kind of details are really glued in well before you get the room sealed up. So here's an example of the LED that's attached to the top of the roomette. Now I've used two different techniques here. One is adhesive tape, and the other is a hot glue. I really like this adhesive tape that I use. It's in Canada where I am, it's called tuck tape. I don't know if it's called the same thing in the States, or other parts of the world. But what it's used for is when you're building a house and they put Tyvek on the outside wall of the house. This is the tape that's used to seal the seams in the Tyvek, or in vapor barrier on the inside of the house. This tape is designed to last like for 100 years or more. So after it's been on for like 3 days, it's not going anywhere. So I really like this tape for wiring. I know I can trust that it's not going to dry out and peel off. But just in case it does, I've used a little bit of hot glue along the edge of the board just to hold it in place, and that will keep that would keep the LED from actually like popping out of the hole for some reason. If it decided, if the wires wanted to bend, that'll hold it in place inside inside the ceiling of the roomette. So here's the Woodland Scenics townhouses, all set up with what we got there, 8 or 9 roomettes, and I've bundled them up into one trunk line that goes down through a hole in the layout. You only need probably about a 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch hole to put the plugs through one at a time, and then you pop the building in place. Now here's a tip. This is the plug that's on my LEDs in the Roomettes kit. It's also the same plug that's on the Woodland Scenics kit that plugs into the hub. There's a couple tabs that go into the slot, and they have a little barb on them. And I recommend that you cut those off, take a few seconds and a sharp knife, and you might have to do it underneath your magnifier to see what you're doing because they're pretty small. But if you cut them off, these plugs are designed to go in aircraft and automobiles, places where there's a lot of vibration, and we just don't have that kind of vibration on our layouts, so we really don't need them. But what I find is when you're trying to unplug unplug the plugs from the hubs, sometimes you have to wiggle them a lot, and it's just like there's no reason to do that. So if you cut those tabs off, they will stay in, but when you go to pull them out, they'll be a lot easier to remove. Okay. So I'm just going to show you a couple things. Here I have, this is one of the hubs that's used to power the LEDs. And I said I was going to show you some other options. And one of them is something made by our friends at NCE, the people that make the power cab. And this is something they call the illuminator. And what this is basically is the same thing that's in the hub, but it only has 3 outputs. But what it does have, well, it's a decoder. It's a stationary decoder. So it can be powered either by 18 volts, 12 to 18 volts, I think, or it can be plugged right into the bus of your layout, your DCC bus for power. And it has 3 outputs that you can adjust the dimness using these CVs on the decoder. And it also has some effects on it. So it does things like flashing, or if you wanted to simulate a fluorescent light or a flickering TV, those effects are built into that. The Woodland Scenics Hub doesn't have the effects built in. So if you want to do something special, you can do that with an illuminator. Now I spoke to NCE about a year ago, and they were talking about possibly doing one with something like 24, 30 outputs, the same thing. And what that would allow you to do would be to put this, hook it up to JMRI, and you could put it on a 24-hour fast clock. You can have output 1 come on at 8 p.m. and go off at 12 p.m. or midnight. You can have the next output come on at 9 and go off at 10:30. So I don't know if that's still happening or not, but that's something that was on the drawing board. Now, someone has actually come out with something that does exactly that in the meantime. This is from a company called Model Train Technology. And if you look for the little man, it's easy to find Model Train Technology on the internet. This has 16 outputs. So, it gets us quite a ways beyond this system, which you're going to outgrow quite quickly. But what's inside here is basically the same thing as the NCE board. There's a decoder in here, and you can operate it as a decoder and program it using your DCC system. And it also has a keypad, so you can do it manually. So you can choose whatever system you want. Now, they do make a version of this that doesn't have the case. It's just the board, and it doesn't have a keypad. So it's only programmable using DCC. But if that's all you need to do, then probably that would be a better option than this one that has the manual keyboard that you can use your fingers with. So that's Model Train Technology. They've actually taken the here. I don't have the port sharing device, but they plugged port sharing devices into each of these 16 outputs and took them from 16 to 64 LEDs. And it powered all 64 LEDs with no problem. So there's plenty of capacity in here to run a whole city of lighting. I want to talk a bit about what I do when I go to shows, because some of you who are scratch builders, and I don't care whether we're talking about Roomettes or something that you've scratch built. When I go to shows, I have these on a turntable, and the problem with that is there's no way that I can power that using a wall wart plugged into the wall when they're turning. So what I've done is Woodland Scenics offers a 18-volt power supply, battery power supply. So they've got a clip that holds 2 batteries that plugs into the lighting hub, and I can power this remotely without having to be plugged in the wall. So let's say you're going to the contest room, you've got your model, and you want the judges to be able to turn the lights on when they're ready. You might be in the middle of the room, so you don't have access to a place to plug in. Well, if you use the battery power and a switch, the judges can just come up. You can say, push the switch, and your building's lit for them to judge. Very handy thing. I'll show you while we're at it. These boxes. When I first started out, I had all the Woodland Scenic stuff inside the boxes, and every show I ever went to, I would set up on Friday night, and everything was ready to go. And Saturday morning, they would turn the lights on in the building, and the lighting would all be different. And I'd have to go in and open the box up and adjust everything and adjust it to the room lighting. Big hassle. So what I decided I was going to do, these are just craft boxes that I got off of Amazon. I think I got 5 of them for $20. Good deal. What I did was let's see if I got a hub here. I can show you. Rather than having to get in the box and adjust the pots, I drilled holes in the box, and I line it up. Make a line with me, right? I line it up so that the pots are in the holes. Actually, since I couldn't do it with that box quickly, I'll just show you right here. Look at that. I can adjust those with a screwdriver from outside of the box. And I'll tell you, boy, did it make my life a lot easier once I figured out that. So again, if you're doing something like that and you want to have access, there's something you can do. I've also even taken the entire board right out of this box that they give you. Oh, that's why. It was a little piece of Velcro. That's why I couldn't get it in there. I've actually taken the board out of this and put it right inside the building. So I have one wire going in the building and then I adjust all my pots, put the roof back on, and all of the guts are right inside of the building. A little hard to do in HO with a small building like this, but I've done it in no scale. And then there's nothing underneath here except a wire coming out the bottom that I can plug into the wall. So that's another thing you can do. Don't be afraid to take the electronics out of the boxes in those. It's not going to make any difference. What else? Oh, interiors. Everybody's got lots of that lying around. If you build a layout, you probably got lots of scraps. I put headboards in almost all of the bedrooms that I do. I've got a headboard, and there's no furniture. But what you can do is you can take a piece of that and a knife, cut a tiny little block of styrofoam, put it up against the headboard. You can paint it, a solid color or do some kind of pattern on it. It doesn't have to be a fancy pattern. It just has to look like something, a little variation in it. And then you've got a bed, and it costs you nothing, right? But again, it's added more 3D detail to the inside of the building for no cost. I even actually sat there and carved out tiny pillows to put at the head of the bed out of styrofoam. And, I do 2 or 3 of them before I finally get one that's the right, size and shape. But you can do a lot of cool things with styrofoam, and, it's everywhere. So use it. What else? I'd like to show you maybe a couple of things that I'm working on right now. I'm doing about eight new ones. A lot of people said, can you do more houses? Because I've done a lot of storefronts. I mean, I started with the DPM line, and arguably a lot of them are storefronts, so that's why you see a lot of those. But I'm coming out with about five residential kits. This one's a Walther's bungalow, I think. No, actually, this one's the Atlas one. That's an Atlas bungalow. So there's one of my test rooms going in. One of the things about the residential rooms is that some of them are more generic than others. And again, people have said, well, can you do some generic ones and that I can put in any building? And that's really hard because, it's fine if they're on the front, but once you get windows in the side, it's really hard for me to guess which building you're going to be working on and how the windows are going to line up. So it's a generic room is really hard to do. These DPM townhouses are probably one of the more versatile kits if you want to put them in other buildings, because they do have some side windows, but most of the rooms face the front. So if you took that box out of there like that, right, then that room, if it didn't have that window on the side, that could go probably in any building that doesn't have a window nearby. And so a lot of the residential kits that I'm working on now are handy for that. You can break them up. You can basically kit bash. You can put a piece of furniture over the window if you didn't have a window there. But I leave it up to people's imagination to make that work. I can't really advocate that people, if people ask me, can I do this? I'm like, well, no, because I don't want anybody to say, oh, you said I could do this. But if you're creative, you can put them in even in a scratch-built building that they weren't meant for. So something to try. Let's go back to the slideshow again. Here's one of the residential rooms that I'm working on right now. And you can see the headboard there. There's a headboard, but no bed. So that's where you can slide a piece of styrofoam up there and make your own. Let's just move to the next one. Yes. And this one's designed to go in the City Classics Railroad Avenue houses, the company houses that Jim Sacco makes for City Classics. That's the other thing too, is it's very hard. I find it very hard to decide sometimes whether to make a 50s interior or an 80s interior or a very modern interior. And luckily, there's a lot of houses that still have furniture from the 1970s, my grandparents. But that's something I always have to kind of wrangle around. And oddly, it's very easy for a 70s interior to pass for a 50s interior, when it's inside a building. Just wanted to mention that one of the things I do is I make packages available on my website. So, for example, if you wanted to do the Mongillo Jewelers roomette, I make little packages that have, everything you need to do it, including a little sample of the gem tack, but we don't want to talk about too much about that. That's too much of a commercial. If you're interested in this kind of thing, I run a Facebook page called Model Railroad Interiors and Lighting. And people come there and they just post whatever projects they happen to be working on. It's a place you can ask questions, have you tried this, or do you know of anything that does that? So check that out if you're interested. And there's a sample of one of the group members, something they've done. Stop by if you're interested. And that's what I have to tell you about Roomettes. And if there's any questions, we could probably field some questions.
Well, you answered most of the questions. Most people want to know if you can do O-scale buildings or O-scale Roomettes, and if you can do more homes and more storefronts. Like you said, that's the question you always get.
It all depends how long I live. If I live long enough, I'll do every building. I mean, there's an interesting procedure for choosing a building. Sometimes I just walk down to my stash. We've all got a stash in the basement that's been sitting there for 5 years. I go up to the buildings and I just pick one that, you know what, that's something I'd like to work on today. Other times I have to figure, there's literally thousands and thousands and thousands of these BPM kits. So I have to choose some days the most popular ones because I know those are the ones that people are going to, more people are going to want. But I've been doing a few for some kits that have been around since the 1960s. There's some old Helgen kits that I've been doing, designing some Roomettes for. And arguably a lot of them modelers don't really use anymore because they might regard them as being too toy-like or whatever. But I find when you put lighting in them and add some 3D detail to them, makes a huge difference. So O-scale ones, I've designed one O-scale one and I built a prototype model for it. But the problem with O-scale is, although we think of O-scale as being twice as big, when you fold a room out in O-scale, it's actually 4 times as big.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And this is a giant envelope to go in the mail to ship them. So that's a bit of a boundary to be crossed. Now, the one I designed in pieces. So it would fit in an envelope this size, and you get one set of walls and another set of walls, and then you have to glue them together and then fold them. Mm-hmm. But I'm still kind of on the fence as to how much demand there would be for O-scale ones, especially when the O-scale people are really good at detailing in 3D as it is, Correct. And to tell you the truth, I was really surprised by N-scale. The response in N-scale has been great, and that might be one reason why is because it's really hard to do, any kind of detailing in N, right? So. I think there's a lesson there, but I may release the O-scale one. We'll see how things go over the next year. But right now, I'm concentrating for this fall on HO again, hoping to get into the Walther's Merchants Row. A lot of requests for Walther's Merchants Row because there's so many of them out there, right?
Yep.
And they've got great big windows out front. So,
do you have different era inside of some buildings?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's
one.
Right now, I only have one era for each kit. However, the way I've numbered my kits, I've numbered them with a system that allows me, if I want to rerun, say for example, Dale's Variety. Dale's Variety, I think, is probably 1970s, 1980s. But it could go up to present, and it could go back to the 60s. But I've numbered them such that there's a series number, and I can do, this is number 1. I could do number 2, and I could do it in a totally different era using exactly the same template. Right?
That's nice.
So as time goes on, I may be able to do multiple eras in different kits. But for now, there's a little bit of crossover, and I never really had too many people look at a finished kit at a show and say, That's not my era. You know, I think I've come close to hitting as many people as I can with that range of about 30 years.
Well, it sounds like there's a demand for some of it now. There was a question about LEDs early on. Does the voltage flipping cause the LEDs to flicker?
If your eye could see fast enough, if you had cat-like reflexes in your eye, you would actually see a flicker like a fluorescent light. But because of something in your eyeball and your brain called persistence of vision, your eye doesn't perceive that flicker, right? If you did slow it down enough, eventually you would see a flicker. But by that point, I think the way the system's set up, I think the LED is so dim that you wouldn't be able to actually see a light at that point, right?
Correct.
So
there's no other questions here. How about you? Can you share your Facebook page and show us some of the pictures on there? Would you mind?
From my personal page?
Yeah, from your Facebook page, because we have 20 minutes left or 15 minutes left, and the questions are slow because people are chewing on their dinner.
I can't believe I've answered all the questions.
You did. There's lots of comments about how good it is, how awesome it is.
Wow. Okay. Well, let me call up a browser here. I'm new with Whereby, so I don't want to hit the wrong button and all of a sudden everything disappears. I'm also using Chrome instead of Firefox, so there's a little bit of a learning curve too. Everything's
Chrome, you can share a Chrome tab.
Yeah. Okay, just give me a second. I'm just going to fire up Firefox because that'll get me there faster. Look at me learning not to use Chrome. Well, everybody can join my personal layout Facebook page too if they'd like.
What about customs? People say you should be offering custom designs.
Yeah. Well, yeah. The problem is that, and one thing I didn't talk with the laser cutting is that it's really difficult with a laser cutter to tell the laser where that image is on the page.
Correct.
And that's where it's the kind of thing that has to be mass produced, because when that's on a sheet and you put that in the laser cutter's blind, right? It doesn't know where that image is on the table, right? And so you can guess, you can say, well, just cut it this one and we'll see, and we'll move it, you know. But then you move it and you didn't move it the right way and you're moving it all over the place. So rather than tell the laser where the image is on the page, we have a system, and I have to give props to Tim Warris at Fast Tracks for the genius ideas coming up with this. Rather than tell the laser where the image is on the page, you basically ask the laser where it wants to cut, and then that goes where it wants to cut. And there's a way to do that, but you have to kind of fool the laser. But there's a lot of setup involved in doing that, and that's what makes it really hard to do custom work.
But if the price is right, then someone might just pay it.
I'll do one or two if somebody wants to do that. You know what? At that point, I'd probably be better off designing it for them and then just cutting it by hand. And I would, you know, as much as I don't like cutting them by hand, but yeah, it'd be a lot more cost effective to do that. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's all the questions. So you'd like to see some layout?
Yeah, an excellent product. I have several of these interiors on my layout, and I love them.
Wow.
You're already famous.
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to know, right? Because when you work at a desk all day and you're looking at a screen, you don't get feedback from people the way you do in other jobs, right? So it's nice to hear that people are enjoying them and finding them easy to use.
And then, of course, these 150 people might have never seen it, and they're just so stunned. Oh, there was one question about do you ship to the UK, because they only have they only see a USA and Canada checkout.
If someone wants to email me, I can arrange that. Actually, if people are patient, surface shipping by mail, it takes a long time, but it's really economical. And all I do is calculate the difference in shipping. I give free shipping for orders of $50 or more. So I just calculate the difference, and I still offer the free shipping option, and they just pay a little more to have it sent. But I'm surprised at how even we've sent some to Australia, and it's pretty cost effective if you're willing to be patient in getting them. Yeah. But yeah, feel free to email me and ask me about that, and I can set all that up.
Great product. We used this in our modeling with the master's program.
Oh, that sounds like Clark.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Clark. Thank you very much. I'm sorry you're not using it this year, but next year for sure. Yeah. Option, and they just pay a little more to have it sent. But I'm surprised at how even.
Jeff, could you mute your mic, please?
And it's pretty cost effective if you're willing to be patient in getting.
So Barry, you going to show us a page?
The other person I have to give a little credit to is Shane at Scale Trains. I'll tell you a little story about that. I called up Shane because I actually went to China with him one time and got to visit the factory with him. And I had been thinking about doing these boxes in plastic with some kind of adhesive sticker on them, that they'd be all ready to go and people wouldn't even have to fold them. That's where the idea, the product idea kind of started. And I asked Shane about the cost of tooling up a box like that in plastic. Mm-hmm. And I knew it would be expensive, but it was way more expensive than I. And it was Shane who actually said, you could make them out of card. And I thought, that's a crazy idea. And I thought about it for a couple of weeks, and I thought that's actually not a bad idea. And I actually went to a local manufacturer that manufactures boxes for aspirin and medications, the tiny little boxes the size of a film canister. And I said, can you do this? And they said, yeah. And they sent me a sample, and they would actually have cut them on it with a die cutter in the factory. So the cost of making them would have been, pennies per piece.
Correct.
And we all would have had, a roomette for $3. But the tooling to make the dies to cut them was about $600 per.
Yeah.
And that's great. But if you decide you want to change something, you can't just move the tooling a bit. You actually have to start over again with a new tool. And that was the beauty of the laser, is that if you want to move a line, you get, you've got your sheet ready to cut. If you want to move a line 1 millimeter, half a millimeter, just to make it fit inside the building a little snugger or leave a little room, easy to do on the laser, right?
Correct.
And it's only the cost of the guy on the computer moving the line, which is pretty cheap, right? So yeah, that's how they ended up being in cardboard. Thank you very much, Shane from Scale Trains, for a brilliant idea, and I owe him for that.
Here's a somewhat personal question. How's the railroad coming?
How's the railroad coming? Well, haven't we all had a lot of time to work on the railroad?
Especially now, right?
It's been a pretty productive 3 months, yeah. As a matter of fact, I've actually had to slow down to get a little bit of work done around the yard and build some roomettes. But we can go over there and take a look. How far back do you want to go? You want to go in reverse order or in a chronological order with these, or?
You got 6 minutes.
Okay, I got 6 minutes. Well, I'll go through real quick then. So what I'm building here is a fictitious line in West Virginia of CSX. I really like the color of the 1980s in the variety of road names. So there were if I'm modeling the late 80s, I've got two or three different CSX paint schemes. I've got Chessie, B&O, Seaboard, Family Lines, lots of color. That's what I really like about it. I started building this on the eve of my 50th birthday, about 5 years ago. I said, if I don't start a railroad by the time I'm 50, I'm taking all this stuff and I'm going to sell it at a flea market. I'm going to get rid of it, because if I don't start now, there's no way I will ever finish it. So on the eve of my 50th birthday, I had some plywood delivered. And the next day I spent my birthday in the basement, which is a great way to spend your birthday. Just zip through some photos here. This is some experiments with styrofoam. I've since moved on to using hard shell techniques. But you know what? Carving styrofoam is fun. I like to vacuum up all the little pieces. This was the first section I built, which was about 24 inches. 24 feet long and about 8 to 10 inches deep at various places. I think we had Jack Ellis on earlier, talking about backdrop buildings. I learned a lot from Jack Ellis and put it into play here. I don't like to brace this is the upper deck. I don't like to brace my levels with bracing underneath the layout. I don't like the clutter. And so what I do is I put bracing on the top in places where I can hide it. So you can see in this is the tunnel where you saw the styrofoam. I put bracing inside the hills, and you can hang off of that like it was a bar at the gym and do pull-ups because of the strength of those braces. So I don't have anything hanging down underneath. I do all my bracing from the top. I think I'm going backwards. I'm going the wrong way. My city grows sedums, giant sedum plants for trees. So every fall I go down to when no one's looking, I go down and I harvest the dead sedums and bring them home. And I have trees that are 7 or 8, 9 inches, 10 inches tall. So I do everything a prototype size as far as my trees go. And I unfortunately don't know what species of sedum these are. But I hope they keep growing them, because every year I get enough to do the next season of trees. Here I am working on a billboard for Family Ties. So I think billboards are a great way to establish era and location. So I've done that right here. This is obviously an 80s show, and it's on a TV station in Fairmont, West Virginia. So hopefully you know where you are. I am drying some trees. And you can see they're pretty tall by the standards of trees that you can buy off the shelf. I understand now why trees are the size they are. One, the commercial trees, they're shorter than they should actually be to be prototype. But man, if you had to go out and buy that tree, as a ready-made tree, that tree would cost you like $8 to $12 off the shelf. So I can understand why manufacturers don't make trees the actual size they should be. Here I am building a way to hide the entrance into the staging yard.
Neat.
My benchwork at this point is pretty high. I'm modeling a mountain railroad grade, so it's from one end to the other, it's pretty much always up. And the upper level ends at around 72 inches. So because of the way the scenery is sloped, even if you're 5'3", you can still see a train going by. It feels a little odd until you get used to it. but it's the only way I've really found to model a mountain grade. It has to go up, right?
So how tall is it there?
That's about the 72-inch mark. Now, what I've done in some places, there's very little switching on the upper level, so there's no really need to reach into a lot of the scenes. But where operators might need to do that, I'm going to put risers along the edge of the benchwork so that they can step up and see what they're doing. But for the most part, you can see everything, all the trains you can see from 5'3" and up. I'm 5'11", so I have a bit of an advantage. The thing about a railroad like that is, no matter what height it is, there's only going to be one spot where it's the optimal height. And that's going to be different for everybody depending on their height and what their preference is. So you're never going to be, if you're modeling a grade, you're never really going to be happy with every spot on the layout. So
correct.
Let's whiz through here so you can see some before and after. I am using cardboard cutouts. These are buildings that I photographed in my neighborhood and photoshopped and glued onto flats. I really don't have a lot of space for buildings here. So once the trees are in front, these buildings are just kind of background action. You don't really even notice them. Here I am getting ready to add some fascia. And there it's cut. Boy, it's nothing like fascia to make you feel like you've actually accomplished something, right?
Correct.
Oh, what did I do there? I made a time capsule. There's a newspaper article in there. So someday when I'm long gone and somebody rips my layout out,
you can slip $100 bill in there.
I don't know. Maybe there'll be $100 worth of scenery they can cash in. But they'll know what was going on back in 2015 when I started this.
Wow.
So that's the 24 feet, and then that's at the 72-inch height. Oh, you can see what I've done there. Another reason I've put a hill there is the bracing's hidden in the hill, but I also have ductwork that goes up the wall for the cool air. Now, when I had the house built, I had trusses put in the ceiling, so there's nothing hanging down below the trusses. And the guys who came in to put the vents in said, well, we have to run the cool air ducts, and we can't run them up where the hot air ducts is, so they have to hang down. And it took me a few days to think about it. I thought, well, I'm never going to use the space under the layout for anything. Why not put the cold air ductwork on the floor and then run those ducts up to the upstairs in the wall, recess them into the wall. So I still have a little bit of ductwork on the wall that I have to cover, but man, it's so nice when you come down here and there's nothing hanging down from the ceiling. There's no poles, there's no ductwork, no nothing. So sometimes you got to stop and think things out. How can I do this to get around these barriers? Oh, one day I decided I was going to go down to the river and cast a lot of rock.
Neat.
And a lot of rock. So I now, when I need a rock, I just reach in the box and pick one that's the right size and shape. Did a little bit of weathering one day. There's a lovely number 10 turnout from Fast Tracks. I said, should I use a number 12? He says, number 12, that's pretty big. So I settled on a number 10. So this is actually the entrance to the layout from staging through that under that bridge. And what I decided was that when people operate my layout, I never want them to actually see the staging area when they're operating. So I will have a staging operator to operate the upper and lower staging, which are both in the same spot. And that tower, I call him the tower operator, will bring a train out, and this is a crew change point. So if you're operating my layout as a train operator, you will pick your train up here, just like a crew would do a crew change here. And that kind of keeps that illusion going, and you don't kind of see what's going on behind the scenes, backstage.
Well, so there's the tower. That brings us to the hour.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I gave you a little bonus show.
Thank you very, very much.
Okay.
Thank you for a great clinic.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I'm really sorry that we couldn't do this all together, but hey, man, this is the next best thing.
Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Thank you, Barry. Be safe.
You too. Have a good time, everyone.